Hey everybody, welcome back to the Calibrate Tools and DIY channel. Today we're going to learn how to mix a can of paint the right way, so stick around and I'll see you right after this. Choosing the right color paint for your interior or exterior surfaces is very important, but it's not as important as mixing your paint properly to get the results you want. There's only a couple of ways to mix your paint. Do you want it shaken or stirred? Take your pick. Both have their advantages and disadvantages, which we'll cover in a minute. Of course, you can always have your local hardware store take care of it like what I'm doing right now. After pushing a few buttons, the tinting machine adds the correct amount of tint to the paint to give you the desired result. Then, after this tinting process is completed, we put the cap back on and we head on over to the mixer/shaker. Yes, you guessed it, it's a machine. So we stick the can in the machine, close the door, press a few buttons, and let it run for about 2 minutes or so to make sure all the additives and solvents are mixed thoroughly. All right, that's great, but what if you're not at the hardware store? How do you mix the paint then? Well, first you got to understand why you're mixing the paint in the first place. Paint consists of 4 elements. Solvents, that's the liquid that suspends everything in the can or container. Then you have additives. Additives prevent mold or mildew. Then you have pigments. Pigments are what gives the paint its color. And then you have binders. Binders are what makes everything stick together. If a can or container of paint sits too long, all those 4 elements begin to separate. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just natural due to gravity and other factors. But if you're going to do a painting project, all those 4 elements need to be mixed thoroughly in order to provide a coherent liquid and give you that color you so desire. So if you want to mix your can of paint, you can shake it. But that's a 1-gallon can of paint. Try doing that with a 5-gallon can of paint. It's not going to be that easy, right? So in that case, you may want to take it back to the hardware store to get it shaken. Another possible disadvantage of shaking your can of paint by hand is it can cause air bubbles. Air bubbles can cause anything from lack of adhesion, meaning the paint won't stick that well, or even creating an uneven, rough surface. And you may even want to throw some small pieces of metal inside to shake it up and help stir the paint around and break up all the additives and help everything coalesce. Then after you shake it, you may want to stir it around a little bit to get rid of any air bubbles. All right, so what about stirring your paint? Well, stirring your paint does the same thing that shaking does. Only difference is you can see what you're stirring. When you're shaking something, you can't see what's in there. Your paint may be dirty, it may have specks, it may have who knows what in there. So taking off the lid, stirring it, allows you to see what's in your paint. Sometimes there's a membrane or film on top of the paint that you got to peel off before you start stirring. Sometimes you got to pick it out. It breaks up on you at times. Nevertheless, you got to take that film off of there before you start stirring. If you live in a colder climate, your paint may be frozen or partially frozen. In that case, you may have to stir it a little bit more or maybe not stir it at all. All right, so there's a couple of tools that you can use to stir your paint. Well, everybody knows about this, right? A paint stirring stick. Only thing is, there's a way to use it. When you stir your paint with this, you want to make sure you scrape the edges of the can to get everything off of the edges of the can. And you want to use this flat part at the bottom to scrape the bottom of the can. Get those edges. Make sure you scrape the bottom corners, the edges of the can as well. And while you're doing this, watch for any air bubbles. Those air bubbles are sneaky. And also remember, you want to make sure the stick is fully submerged, okay, before you start stirring. If it's not, it can cause air bubbles. You can do it for about 7 to 10 minutes, and you should have a good consistency. As long as it's not clumpy and there's no air bubbles, you'll be fine. Hey, guess what? They got machines for that too. It's called a drill. Right here, with this, a paint stirrer. Just make sure the chuck of your drill can accommodate the shaft. If you're going to use a drill with a mixer, make sure you submerge the mixer all the way to the bottom before you start stirring. If not, you're going to get air bubbles. Another tip when using the mixer is that it's going to create a vortex in the paint. And if it's going clockwise, you want to move the drill counterclockwise against it, okay? And don't be afraid to scrape the sides of the can with the mixer either. Raising your mixer to the top while stirring brings the vortex to the surface and pulls down any air bubbles on the surface. Gently pull out the mixer while reducing the RPMs as you pull out. That will reduce air bubbles as well. Just in case you're wondering, they got mixers for 5-gallon buckets as well. Here's a couple. Got this one right here. And you got this guy right here. Another important thing to remember, guys, when you're mixing or blending your paints, you want to stay within the same brand. Different companies have different formulas they use for their paint, so you can end up having an uneven finish because you use different brands to mix your paint. Stay within the same brand, preferably within the same line, so you can avoid that mistake. So what do you think, guys? It's not that hard to do. All you need is the right tools and you're in business. Hey guys, if you learned something today, hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.